Hello and welcome to Newsbreak Chats. I'm Chai Hofelenia, the editor of Newsbreak. This is the investigative and in-depth section of Rappler. This is our 8th episode under quarantine, and this only means that we've been under quarantine for 8 months already. And we expect this will continue until year end, if not maybe Q1 or Q2 of 2021, next year. But for this month, we decided to focus on our disinformation stories and the research that goes into these stories. It's important to also understand how disinformation connects or translates to action on the ground or offline. May epekto ba ang online sa offline? So we'll look into this. We'll be talking to Gemma Mendoza, who supervises research on big data and disinformation. Hi, Gemma. And we'll also be talking to Camille Elemia, who writes and reports about the media and disinformation. And finally, we also have Rambo Talabong, our intrepid police reporter. Welcome to Newsbreak Chats.
Hi.
Thank you for the invitation, ma'am.
Yes. Walang libreng kape. Okay, let's talk about, first of all, one of the recent investigative stories that we published for the month of October was a story done and worked on by a team, researchers and Camille. Maybe, Camille, you could talk to us first about the major findings in that story and how the NICA chief is really involved in your findings. Ano ba yung major findings?
So first, we got a hold of that information when Rambo did the story on what happened in the budget hearing na raised na the NICA chief, Alex Monteagudo, has been sharing false information against progressive lawmakers. So the team decided to look into his history of online posts. And what we found out was as early as October 2018, he had been sharing posts from this page or this website called the Daily Sentry, one of the pages taken down by Facebook in January 2019. So what happened was, October pa lang, 2018, nag-start na siya mag-share. And then November 2018, it doubled like 20 shares. And then December, around 80 shares. So it's very important to note that the timing of the sharing coincided when President Duterte raised the issue of, remember the Red October? It's supposed to be a plot to oust him back in 2018. So at that time, I mean, before 2018, there was no share. There were no shares in Monteagudo's Facebook account against the communist groups or left-leaning people. That's because, remember, President Duterte at that time was still allied with these people. So what we found out was aside from the Daily Sentry, Monteagudo also shared several posts from anonymously managed pages, which the team, which included Ms. Gemma, did a story on. It's about how police official pages have amplified questionable posts from these questionable pages. And we found direct links to that.
So essentially, Camille, you're saying that the recent discovery and the trends that you noticed, it's not really new. Kumbaga, way back 2018 pa, so about 2 years ago, he at least, the NICA chief already started sharing this. Rambo, could you give us a little background? Sino ba tong si Monteagudo? What is he like? Have you spoken to him, for example?
Okay, so si Alex Monteagudo po, actually hindi ko pa siya nakausap in person. I tried to speak with him once kasi, I cover Camp Crame and minsan may events yung NICA doon sa Camp Crame. And one of those events, pumunta ako to try to get his contact because we were also doing a story on NICA before. I tried to go to him, but then he was blocked by a lot of aides, a lot of generals. It seemed like he really didn't want to speak with the media. And even I tried to insist myself to speak with him, ayaw makipag-usap. So Alex Monteagudo is a retired general of the Philippine National Police. He belongs to the PMA class of 1981. And this is the Dimalupe class of 1981. It's actually pretty popular during the Pinoy administration because it's really notable for producing 3 4-star generals. You have Gregorio Catapang in the AFP, you have Espina as well as si Purisima, I think 81 din sila. So this is a really distinguished class he's a part of. And Monteagudo isn't just any graduate from the 1981 class. He's also a part of the top 10. So when I saw this, researching his background, it actually shocked me na naging ganito yung kanyang background ngayon na ang dami niyang kalat when it comes to intelligence. And it actually led to the deferment of his budget because of his controversial posts on his Facebook. In the PNP, he served as the Director for Investigation Detective Management, which is the directorate in the PNP that handles the CIDG, the high-profile CIDG. He also was the Director for Operations, so the DO for the PNP is the one that produces highly detailed plans for the projects of the PNP. Under the Duterte administration, the DO produced Double Barrel. And before he retired, he was the Police Chief of Region 12, as well as the Chief of I believe, DO yung last post niya before siya in-appoint under the Duterte administration as NICA chief.
So quite impressive credentials, di ba?
Yes, on paper, yes.
Yes. But okay, so given those credentials and given the important post that he occupies, intelligence chief, no less, di ba? You sort of expect high standards that he would try to uphold insofar as intelligence is concerned. Ano ba yung standards that are typically spelled out? Do they hold themselves to certain principles or rules? Meron ba silang manual of some sort? Is there anything that they follow when it comes to intelligence?
So intelligence gathering really is a discipline for the Philippine National Police and the Armed Forces that seeks to prevent crime and to also file criminal cases. So build up kind of case for people who have committed crime as well as people who are about to commit crime. So that entails thorough investigation. And a basic principle for that is just corroborating whatever you are finding, and that all the pieces of information that you have, you can have it presented before the courts. But what we're seeing now is a culture under the Duterte administration where intelligence is just, siguro in the Filipino terms, parang basta-basta lang siya. Nilalabas nila yung intelligence, halimbawa yung drug list, and hindi nila bine-verify kaagad-agad na nilalagay sa korte. Kaya kung magpa-file man sila ng cases based on intelligence alone, hindi siya tumataya sa court, kaya na-dismiss. And I guess another branch of this is to seek the prevention of any crimes. A failure of intelligence that we saw in the recent months is yung nangyari sa Holosulu, yung barilan ng police at saka ng soldiers, and nakita sa investigation that there's a lack of coordination daw because there's a lack of sharing of intelligence among the AFP and the PNP in Sulu. So this is basic intelligence coordination. And a controversy right now we're seeing is that ang laki ng pondo for intelligence, but at the same time, bakit ang daming intelligence failures na nangyayari?
Magkano ba yung budget for intelligence, and how does this year's intelligence budget compare to last year's budget? Do you have any gauge or any idea?
Well, actually, the intelligence budget for throughout agencies, it's pretty much almost the same. Yung observation ng ating reporters who have been covering the Senate and the House, as well as the Armed Forces and the Philippine National Police. And these are different agencies. You have the Office of the President, which has 4.5 billion. Mataas to. Kahit na hindi siya tumaas na ganun kataas between these 2 years, this is such a big jump as compared to other presidents. And then you have the Philippine National Police, which has a budget of 190 billion. They're saying that most of the money will be spent for personal services. But then, as we know, a high-quality intelligence gathering is also part of why the Philippine National Police is being paid almost double under the Duterte administration. And then for the Department of National Defense, you have a budget of 200 billion as well. And much of that budget is spent on the military. Actually, 97 billion is spent for the Philippine Army, which is the branch of the military right now, which is under fire for its also quite faulty handling of intelligence and release of intelligence.
Those are huge amounts, billions of pesos. So it's
billions.
It's quite discouraging, diba? You have these huge amounts given to these intelligent, supposedly intel agencies. Tapos you see the chief engaging in disinformation. Let's go back a bit to the story na sinulat ng research team and sila Camille. I think one important name that also stood out there was in that story was the Daily Sentry. parang naging network siya, and it was from the Daily Sentry that the Nika chief was sharing false information. Jama, could you tell us a little bit about the Daily Sentry? Is this new? Ngayon lang ba to lumabas, or meron ng trails from the past years?
Well, actually, the Daily Sentry is one of those websites that we uncovered that were introduced sometime in early 2018. So yung sinasabi ni Camille, the content that was shared was in October 2018. So mga bago lang at that time yung the Daily Sentry. And one of the things that got our attention there was that it's been really fact-checked a number of times. We spotted it a number of times, sinasubmit sa amin kasi tapos for fact-checking. So medyo napansin namin siya talaga. And one of the things that we noticed about it was that he'd like to use this term expert. So medyo na-curious kami kasi the word expert was being associated with certain individuals who do not look like experts naman talaga nung tinitingnan namin. So
anybody can be an expert.
Yeah, parang like when we looked at one profile, for instance, na sinabi nilang trade expert daw, pero nung tiningnan ko naman wala namang previous in international trade. So parang ang weird lang. So we started studying the titles that they had. Our team scraped it and scraped their stories, and then looked at the titles, and then looked at incidents in which they used the term experts. Tapos lo and behold, when we were looking at that, kasi we wanted to know who are these experts that they kept on citing, and this person who we didn't know came up. It's not a Filipino. This person, Adam Gary. We wanted to know who he is kasi sino siya? Bakit siya palaging binabanggit na experts? And then ang napansin namin, he was often interviewed by some Russian websites like RT, mga Russian websites. And that was interesting to us. That was really interesting to us. And then around that time, the US Senate was investigating Russian disinformation, and as it in relation to the last US presidential elections. And there was some data then that was given to the US Senate by the platforms, the various platforms. And this guy's name also came up there in one study that we saw by this group, New Knowledge. And then medyo he figured in this graphic, like sort of a diagram that was entitled the broader disinformation ecosystem. Nandun siya. So that was really very interesting to us, that this guy who's unknown to us, like not really like very much well known here in the Philippines, suddenly is being cited by this website na also came up, and known what was interesting to us about this Daily Sentry was hindi mo talaga naman makita kung sino-sino talaga yung mga yung mga editors niya. Hindi natin kilala. So and then citing these personalities,
so
them as
so in effect,
people they quote.
In effect, what you've seen and what you're seeing is a link between the Daily Sentry, which has links to Russia, and then
somehow,
and then mukhang merong ngayon, because of the sharing that's being done by some of the military and police officers, pumapasok na dito sa Pilipinas. So I guess it's
favorite nila to.
Yes, it's a two-way street, di ba? Pero Gemma, siguro yung people who don't really understand how research on this information is done, siguro yung iniisip ng iba, teka, if you're looking at accounts, if you're looking at pages, hindi ba may violation yan of privacy? Ano ba yung mga tinitingnan ninyo when you do your research? Either
So
Camille or Gemma.
Yeah. We look at public posts. So meaning you you publicly posted something, and that means that's parang that's not private communication anymore. Private communication will be something like I message Camille, for instance. So hindi ko dapat titingnan yon kasi that's between Camille and myself. Or hindi dapat titingnan ng iba yon kasi that's between Camille and myself. But these are public posts in public groups and public pages, and because of that, and because they have the tendency to go viral, we look at we look at that, yung mga mga content that have the tendency to go viral because they're circulated in spaces that might have a lot of following. So medyo they're of public interest in our thinking. There's also an exception to the data privacy law that's related to journalistic research. So journalists, provided that there's public interest, can do data driven research around these things.
Okay. Concretely, what exactly does that mean, Camille? So, for example, so ang daming public posts, di ba, on Facebook and on Twitter. If you're looking at the posts of a particular person or a particular network, how does that work? And ano itsura ng database?
We have this social media monitoring tool called Shark Tank. So basically, yung mga public posts, we can monitor it from there. And makikita lang, ang makikita lang namin doon, public posts lang. We don't, alam mo, hindi kami nagpapanggap na befriend someone to get his posts or to check his posts. Walang ganon. It's just public lang talaga. And then makikita sino yung mga nag-share and all that. Maybe Miss Gemma can explain it further. But for me, I think yung sa ginagawa naming research and sa mga stories, it's very important for us to monitor public officials' posts on social media because, like, for example, yung dun sa recent takedown of Facebook, there's a army captain who's behind all these some pages of this network that was taken down. So I think it's very important na kasi ang argument ng AFP was it's on his personal capacity, it's in his personal capacity, but hindi, parang if you're a public official and you post publicly, you're covered, parang fair game na yun. Hindi yun, especially if you engaged in questionable activities or in spreading misinformation or disinformation, covered ka na nun. I mean, for me, wala dapat excuse doon, kagaya ng sinasabi ng mga AFP.
Gemma, yon, sabi ni Camille, binato ni Camille ulit sa'yo. Could you talk about Shark Tank, for example, that wonderful database that you so love?
So actually we started started collecting data in social media because nag-umpisa to doon sa, remember Chai, nag-investigate tayo doon sa, like we found there was this reader who flagged us or alerted us of this group of accounts that were interacting with each other, like amplifying each other and reacting to each other's or engaging with each other's posts, and they were circulating false claims. At that time, this was around the 2016 elections yata, and they were circulating false claims about Marcos and Robredo. So related to that, tiningnan namin yung accounts na yon, and yung friends ng accounts na yun, yung ano nila, yung mga fina-follow nilang pages were actually publicly available. So we looked at those pages and they were posting to this mga mga buy and sell groups, but also to these groups of pages na mukhang mga fan pages ng mga Marcoses, and so fan groups ng mga Marcoses and so on. So we started looking at them and then started automating the kasi there's so much engagement nga. We wanted to know what's going on kasi this was around the time when we noticed that there was a shift in social media. There was this shift going on social media where you're starting to see parang very hateful comments, very hateful posts. And they were targeting people. They were targeting critics. They were targeting yung mga journalists and mga activists. So we started looking at that, and then kaya nabuo yung yung database na tinatawag na natin ngayong Shark Tank. Ang focus nun are public pages and public groups. And then from time to time may mga nakikita tayong mga accounts na nagpo-post doon sa mga public pages and public groups na yan. At tinitingnan natin one is what's the content that's being posted, kasi marami nga itong na-create ng mga Facebook groups. A lot of them are fan pages of the president. A lot of them were also fan pages of the Marcoses. And then a lot of, we also saw a lot of these so-called Philippine history pages na parang alternative history daw or parang hidden history daw. We also saw quite a lot of these groups na ganun nga, mga related to some politicians or are promoting some politicians.
In effect, depende sa sharing behavior, no? So kung merong pinost si X and then shared by Y, then nakikita nyo yon, and then you collect it in your database. And I
think that's what's really amazing. I think that's what's really amazing with Shark Tank. It's like yung network ng mga post. Kasi if an account posts something, it really doesn't make sense if you don't put it in a bigger context to see how they truly operate. So I think that's really the highlight of it, identifying the networks.
Okay, so looking at those accounts, Camille, meron ka bang nakitang trends or patterns when you looked at Monteagudo, for example, or even there was an earlier investigative report. So itong latest natin is October, and then there was an earlier one which focused on the police, I believe, and that was in August. Meron bang same patterns that you observed?
Yeah, meron. I remember when the team worked on this police-sponsored disinformation, we were actually, remember, Miss Gemma, we weren't really sure if we're gonna put yung military-sponsored data. Kasi parang, we know deep within us na involved ang military, but we couldn't just put it out there without solid evidence. So, meron kaming nakita doon at different pages, and ang ginagawa nila, there's two things yun. The official pages, they directly post questionable content or sometimes directly wrong information talaga. And the other one is, if they don't post it directly, they amplify posts from questionable or anonymously managed pages and accounts. So yun yung nakita namin. And may nakita kaming 2 or 3 accounts, 2 or 3 pages na later on were part of the takedown, but they're also part of the posts that were shared by Monteagudo before the takedown of these accounts or of this network. So, dun yung connect. Kasi, important to note lang, nung na-takedown yung the Daily Sentry, which is one of the favorites of Monteagudo, early 2019, nag-slow down din yung posts niya. So, anong nangyari is, bumalik siya nung 2020, tapos ang mga sinishare na niya, itong mga nakita ng research team na questionable pages na directly linked to the official accounts of the police. I mean, official online accounts of the police. And they're into red tagging, and they're into outright lies against critics, against even directly linking terrorism to opposition to the ABS-CBN shutdown. So yun yung mga latest efforts nila nung 2020.
Did you want to add anything to that, Chance?
Yeah, so yung mga pages na to, as Camille was saying, hindi kami sure at nung una kasi the pages that were being there were these anonymously managed pages, meaning hindi publicly known yung mga yung administrators nila. And they were being amplified by these police pages. So, yung title nga ng story was police-sponsored pages, precisely because of that, na na hindi, ang mas sure kami, yung mga police, kasi yung mga police official pages were really sharing and posting. Pero, we just learned later that those anonymously managed pages, it seemed, were connected to the military, as in, we couldn't have known that because we don't have access to the administrator data. And that's something I think that only Facebook has access to.
Facebook. Okay, let's talk about Facebook later.
Yes.
It's actually we're looking at disinformation and all these what siguro sa iba napaka-esoteric naman ng pinag-uusapan ninyo. But I guess it's important to really show the connection, no? Bakit mahalaga na pag-aralan yung mga nagaganap online? Kasi meron itong epekto sa nagaganap sa totoong buhay. And siguro Rambo can discuss a little bit just to illustrate the importance of studying this information online. Kasi meron talaga siyang impact on everyday behavior and everyday action offline and on the ground. Ano ba yung nakita nating impact so far, Rambo?
Actually, what we're really focusing on is disinformation that's really harmful. I mean, disinformation is really something, as you mentioned, Ma'am Chai, it's really esoteric, but at its core, it's really spreading false information, rumors, baseless information. And there's disinformation that we can say is quite harmless. Halimbawa, parang chikahan lang ng mga tao, pwede halimbawa showbiz-related story, which can still be damaging for celebrities, but for halimbawa local na chikahan lang ng mga spreading of lies, it's not really super damaging for a person. But when it comes to weaponizing disinformation by the state, by the military, by the police, and then they use lies to actually amplify messages against critics, to actually red tag students, red tag activists, or entire organizations, so that they can be silenced. That's another issue that we are focusing on, and we're seeing this as something that has a very tangible effect when it comes to students being red tagged. Natatakot silang sumali sa mga organisasyon para mailabas nila kanilang mga advokasya. At ang nakikita rin natin sa media, kung nire-red tag ang mga journalists, syempre mas natatakot sila na maglabas ng mga storya na kritika sa gobyerno at saka magtanong sa mga opisyal na dapat talagang mapagtanungan nila kasi trabaho nila to. Lumalabas tong fake news at saka itong disinformation bilang sandata ng gobyerno para talagang magpatahimik ng katotohanan at saka ng mga pinalalabas ng mga mamamahayag at saka ng mismo mga aktivista at mga estudyante.
Okay. Pero dapat nga, di ba, medyo mataas natin sa government officials, whether police yan or military. Kasi dapat standards. You're in government may standards dapat, di ba? Kasi tinitingala kayo. And I guess binabayaran kayo ng taong bayan. Ang bayad sa sweldo ay galing sa taxes. So maybe the question also is, meron bang standards ang police and military na sinusunod when it comes to social media?
Actually, maganda pong simulan natin talagang standards for government officials, government employees. There really are standards by the Civil Service Commission to tell government officials to act with honor, to act professionally on social media. But there's a different standard that is applied for the military and the police, especially since they are working with security matters, especially they're working in institutions that should not be politically involved. So merong extra provisions dito. And we looked at the handbooks of the Philippine National Police and the Armed Forces of the Philippines, and according to their handbooks, bawal silang mag-engage sa rants or gripes, as in bawal silang magkalat sa social media, mag-rants about the projects of the government or even their enemies. Bawal sila makipag-away sa ibang mga tao, as in from different political parties. As well as sinabi rin, actually this is a quote that is from the AFP handbook, do not debate, quarrel, or engage in other forms of negative discussions detrimental to the image of the Philippine military. So, pinagbabawalan yung mga ganyan. Yes, I'm really quoting this. When we were reading the handbook of the Philippine military, I was actually shocked bakit parang walang sumusunod dito masyado, especially among generals. I mean, maraming generals na sumusunod dito, but meron mga generals talagang nagrarant on social media and nakikipag-away sa comment section sa Facebook. So these are standards that they should uphold, especially since as a constitution nga talaga mismo na the military should not be involved in political matters. But then for the Philippine military, they are saying that there is a new campaign to use social media as propaganda, and it is a means towards an end of ending the insurgency in the Philippines. And nakita natin that it's bleeding over to entirely different organizations, kahit na walang kinalaman sa militanteng organisasyon, kahit na walang revolusyong talagang inaas na mga tao. Nangyayari, din sila, naapektuhan din sila ng propaganda ng military. So we are seeing a breakdown of these standards that we are expecting, and these are standards that are imposed by the military and the police themselves, which they don't really follow.
Paano kung if the thinking is sandali lang, ang mga komunista, ang kaliwa, they engage in propaganda. Natatalo ang police at ang military sa propaganda war. And the propaganda war is being waged on social media. Therefore, we have to actively fight the propaganda war on social media. So, valid argument ba yon for them? May danger ba doon? Or, yeah, okay, tama naman sila. Meron bang ganon na thinking?
I think for the military and the police, they really have to set the line of limits when it comes to dealing with propaganda of the left or the CPP and BA. I mean, I would say that it's valid to really correct if there's wrong information that's being spread by armed groups, to declare, for example, that people should just kill anybody or kill the military, or just declare revolution, which is really against the law, diba? And for them, they can say that that's illegal. You can't say that. But then the problem comes in when they're going too much. Even people who are not really involved with the armed struggle, in the armed movement, the revolutionary movement, tinilatag nila, sinasabi nila na kayo bahagi ng revolusyon. At dito natin nakikita yung phenomenon of the military also red tagging Liza Soberano, highly popular actress. Hindi naman siya engaged sa militanteng gawain. Nagsalita lang siya sa forum, pero the military took that opportunity to call her out. You were in a forum by Gabriela and you are already vulnerable to go into militant action. So hindi pa man siya militant, sasabihin ka ng gobyerno or ng military na you're going there. So, teka muna, wag kang sumali dyan sa advocacy yan. And that's destructive because ang daming advocacies that aren't necessarily militant, just left. It's just part of the leftist ideology. You can fight for human rights. You can fight for women's rights. You're not advocating for militant action. But because it's in that whole big side, you're being lumped with everybody else, with the armed movement. You're being lumped into that crowd, and that's what's dangerous here. And that's where we're seeing abuse. Na kung sino-sino na lang ang nandito na nakikita, halimbawa, kritikal sa gobyerno or may pinaglalabang mga karapatang pantao. Kung galit ang military, sasabihin, militante, you're on the way there. So pwede kang sabihin na, pupunta ka na dyan, tumahimik ka, huwag kang magsalita. Kami nang bahala.
I hear
Agreed. And
Gemma.
also, I
Yes. Okay, go ahead, Gemma. I heard you.
Yeah. So, idadagdag ko lang kasi let's go into specifics here. It's one thing to disseminate information, di ba? And sana naman, pag nagdi-disseminate ng information, verified yun, totoo yun, di ba? May basehan. Pero what we have spotted that were being circulated by these police pages and then these pages that turned out to be linked to some military personalities is that they were circulating really false information. As in, like, isang example na lang doon, may COVID-19 daw si Sara Ilago. May yung namundok daw siya. Yung picture naman was a picture that she tweeted herself and came from this, parang this event na she attended. And it's a well-documented event. So, this is, parang, in effect, it's really and some in a number of cases we spotted yung tipong like mga pictures that were like pictures of her having the Medusa hair and so on. So it's really parang there seems to be an effort to make people to really demonize these personalities and attack attack them and make people hate them. Yun yung napansin namin. In some occasions, in fact, kaya namin napansin yung police was because one thing that was circulated, one post that was circulated was something that was shared by National Office ng Community Relations Office ng Police. So medyo nakakabahala yung ganon na these are supposed to be pages that are defending people's rights or at least protecting our safety, and they are engaged in these things.
Exactly. and I don't know, maybe if you share this sentiment, no, parang mas nakakatakot that the police and the military are involved in this kind of activities kasi may baril sila eh, di ba? Parang yung kung sino man yung babanggitin nila, papangalanan nila, they're very, very vulnerable. And dahil, yun na nga, official pages ang nagsisiwalat or even ranking officials ang nag-share ng information and the baseless allegations, marami tuloy maniniwala na siguro nga ito engage in terrorism, ito may ginagawang kalokohan. So sige, targetin natin, pagtripan natin. So yung mga ganon ang nakakatakot. And I remember that I think it was Ted Te who warned, no? Sabi niya,
Yes.
the danger really is, of course, the extreme is EJK, pero merong ding warrantless, mga warrantless arrest, especially given the anti-terror law. Tapos yung search and seizure, pwedeng gawin na lang yan dahil lang pinangalanan ka or tinag, ni-red tag ka ng isang militar or sundalo o kaya police or even any government official for that matter from the executive. Siguro given that, yung tanong din siguro, may recourse ba yung ordinaryong tao na tina-target or na red tag ng mga ito, people in government? What can they do?
Honestly, it's a
Go,
very
Camille.
difficult question. Honestly, it's a very difficult question. Niisip ko, meron ba? In an ideal world, meron dapat, like the people can ask help from government, but if the government is starting all this propaganda, all these attacks against ordinary citizens, what's there to do? What's there to do next? So, but I still think, I still go back to what happened after the 1986 people power. Like, kaya nandun umusbong like yung mga kagaya ng media shows ng Hoy Gising and everything like that. Kasi yung mga tao dun humihingi ng tulong. So maybe dito sa nangyayari ngayon, the public sector and the media, like we can collaborate to expose these kinds of disinformation and misinformation, because I believe that's really one way to stop them, to call them out and show the world or show the Filipinos that they're really doing this, para kung may hiya pa silang natitira. But when it comes to like meron ba talagang way to solve it, or meron ba talagang recourse for Filipinos? I mean, there are laws that they can use to, file a case and all that, but with the kind of institution that we have, justice system that we have, I don't think it's really plausible.
Gemma.
So this is really why we started doing this research. Kasi actually yung unang was the press was attacked, and we were looking at that, what's behind these attacks against the press. And for me, it's important to document. That's a very important thing to stress. It's important to document what's happening. When we spot it, we need to make sure that we are documenting it. And that really is why we have Shark Tank. The point of that is to document both yung content that is being posted, but also the way it is being circulated. That's something we are studying, and it's important to do that so that action can be done. Kung hindi man sa gobyerno, sa side ng gobyerno, kasi nga mukhang may involvement na nga sila, and that's getting more clearer now. But also on the part of social media platforms where this is happening. Kasi ito na yung spaces na to, di ba, yung social media platforms, and policing hate is something na or policing harmful misinformation is something that the platforms have said they will act on. So isa yun sa mga mga areas ng areas of engagement that we are looking at here. So not just local but internationally in relation to the platforms.
Okay, very important point yung what Gemma mentioned about documentation. So kung baga, alam nyo, weather lang to, we're watching you, you're in power today, but years from now, you won't be. And we have a trail because we're watching you and we're documenting everything. Siguro final question. We have a pandemic, but we also have a pandemic online. Is this something that can be cured? Is this something that can be fixed? And how do we even start to clean up? Who wants to begin? Maybe Rambo.
How can we solve this pandemic, this information pandemic? Is that the question, Ma'am Chai?
Yeah. Maaayos ba? Or wala? It's a given and we just have to live with it.
Mm-hmm. I think it's such a big damage that's already been dealt in the online discourse and the online online way of living, and it's especially toxic since we're all online right now. But we have to remember that most of these patterns, most of these problems, really came in with the assumption of President Duterte. It did not come out of thin air. It's really incentivized. It's really allowed by the state. It's really allowed by our politicians to thrive, and what really troubled me with this problem right now, tinatanong nyo kanina, Ma'am Shai, is there any way to clear your names? And sinabi ni Secretary of National Defense Delfin Lorenzana, one of the more sober cabinet officials, sabi niya, kung wrongly tagged kayo, edi mag-file na lang kayo ng kaso. And that's talking to lawmakers. Paano pa yung mga tao na ordinaryo kung na-red tag or talagang inakusahan ng wrong information online? Ano pang magagawa nila? So there's a problem that's really already rampant, and I don't know how we're going to face this right now. It's I really agree with, we have to continue documenting how bad it is right now so that we can move forward.
Camille, do you have any ideas?
I really think like on top of documenting, it's really important to expose these people para alam din ng mga tao, like when they encounter posts from these groups or from these officials, they doubt what they're posting. And also I think in terms of, kasi meron na tayo, like when I said earlier na okay, there are laws, but given the justice system that we have, we're not really sure if something's gonna happen out of it. But I think sa legal aspect naman or sa legislative aspect naman, it's very difficult to pass a law about this because yun nga precisely yung nangyayari na it could be used both ways. Pero I think sa Congress natin, maybe they can exercise more oversight functions on these agencies. I mean, ideally, di ba, dapat takbuhan ng mga tao yung representatives nila sa Congress. But given that this institution is politically motivated, paano tayo? Pero I'm still hoping that maybe they can wake up and see that their oversight functions are needed right now. Kasi saan pa pupunta yung mga tao? Honestly, I mean, the media can help people, but the media also is being attacked by the government. So parang naiipit yung sitwasyon ngayon ipit. So I think maybe Congress could look into it, or at least the Senate. I have more hopes for them than for the House.
You sound skeptical.
Halata ba?
Halata. Gemma, do you have brilliant
Ang
ideas?
nakakatakot kasi, Chay, yung, remember, when the pandemic, I mean, nung kick in yung pandemic and then they legislated nga yung, di ba, yung Bayanihan Heal as One Act, isa dun sa mga provisions na ipinasok dun nila, fake news. And these are the agencies that are saying they're implementing that provision, di ba? And they went after critics. So, as Camille said, medyo nakakatakot when you go and go the route of legislation right now. So I think for me, it's really vigilance on the part of the public that's critical right now. Vigilance, making sure that we're raising this, we're exposing this, we're documenting it, and we're raising this to other to different levels of action, not just local. Kasi otherwise parang kung hindi man nagkakaroon ng action dito, at least magkakaroon ng action somewhere, hopefully. Medyo na discouraging in a way. Kasi para siyang medyo tayo ngayon, tali tayo ngayon, lalo na when it would seem that those who are supposed to be protecting people's safety are implicated here. Pero yeah, we need to keep doing it.
And I think also like
go ahead.
Like in terms of exposing these accounts or these activities, I think it also helps to put pressure. By exposing this, you also put pressure on social media platforms in a way. I mean, kasi ang hirap, we're in the Philippines, and I mean in the bigger context of thinks hindi naman tayo ganun ka-importante for several social media unless of course we keep shouting to the world what social media is doing or like these platforms are doing to our country, which I think we've been doing naman as Rappler, di ba? Pero yon, I mean, we just continue to do that para, alam mo yon, like, we keep on knocking Facebook, Twitter, or YouTube na what you're doing is still not enough. You're still doing so much. I mean, you're still destroying so much of what's left in our country. So help us fix this. Something like that.
Okay, thank you very much for your ideas and your thoughts. Malaking problema talaga ang disinformation online. If we have the coronavirus to deal with in our everyday lives, we have falsehood and lies and disinformation we have to deal with naman on social media. And clearly the effects on democracy are very evident. Even as yung sinabi nga ni Rambo kanina, na weaponization of disinformation is also very, very dangerous because it leaves dissenters and critics of institutions and government agencies very, very vulnerable. So we have to guard against this. And as Gemma pointed out, we need to document everything, every falsehood that is shared by whoever, especially those who are in government. We need to be vigilant, and we also need to partner with other international groups who share the same sentiment. Thank you very much for joining us, and hopefully we get to chat again next month. I'm Chai Hofelenia, and this is Newsbreak Chats.